Well, good morning, people! Good to see you, man. That was awesome to have the kids singing up here. And I was digging on just watching the different kids, right? Because it reminds me that Redemption Church is made up of a lot of different people. And so there's some kids that were so representing like the charismatic arm, right? And they're just like, ah! They're just singing everything else. And then you had like the Edmonds son who was like a good Southern Baptist, hands in his pocket the whole time, but he was rocking it, baby, But it was awesome. And then you had Hudson down here with Maeve, so Pastor Brandon's kids, and Hudson was just serious, man. And Maeve was just, she was just going. It was so awesome to watch that. So good times all the way around here. Church in a field, in a tent in Georgia. It is humid today, man. It is something. So, hey, before I get underway, just a couple of things. One is I dropped my middle child, Emma, off at WSU this week, moved her into her apartment, like 106-degree weather, and then I got in my car and sobbed like a baby all the way back to Duvall. Yes, my child is now over there. She's the artsy one that sings up here every once in a while. So be thinking about my daughter, praying for her. She's off to college, but it's an exciting thing for her, so that was one thing. And then the other thing I wanted to just highlight really quick is, again, we had tons of people helping this week, made an awesome Bible camp, but I'm going to ask some people to stand up right now. I'm actually going to ask the McDonald's to stand up. They are our directors of children's outreach, and they are awesome. Pulled off an excellent, amazing Bible camp, and what a great way, again, just to love our community, share with our community that we love Jesus. That's what we're about here. We want people to understand that life is better with Jesus. That's really the heartbeat of what makes Redemption Church tick. And so I hope even today, it's a reminder to us of how that is true and how the Bible gives us guidance for following hard after Jesus because, again, he really does make our life better. So I'm going to go ahead and pray right now, and we're going to get right underway. Jesus, I thank you for this crazy thing called grace that doesn't merely forgive us, but embraces us and works within us like a seed that grows and shapes and adapts us to your heart and character. And I pray that that would be what makes us unique in our world. It's not simply that we believe a creed or an ideology or a code. It wouldn't simply be that we want to be somehow moral or ethical in the way we do life. But more deeply, I pray that it's your heartbeat through our lives, through our words, through our conduct, saturated with grace that people can see. And that from that brings change and transformation. So I pray above all else that we would really display and demonstrate how life is better with you. And so even as we look at this ancient wisdom for our modern day lives, I still ask that it's all about you in the process. It's not just about good advice or good words, but it's about godliness through your grace. And so we thank you, Jesus, and we love you so very much and need you in this process of life. And so work in us, we ask in your good and perfect name. Amen. So over the next few weeks now, we're going to be doing this whole little thing, just a series, little micro-series in the book of Proverbs. And I love Proverbs because it's one of those books that you can give to almost anyone, and there's this immediately get it factor, right? Like you can just read it and go like, oh yeah, that's no doubt. Like that is good insight for life. It is the micro book of the Bible, right? And that's what I think is so useful because when I talk about how life is better with Jesus, some of that is really deep and heady, but other parts are real practical and simple. And that's what's great about this particular piece of literature in the Bible. It just gives us some insights for living that are truly helpful. And today I want us to look at something that I think is hugely important in our current cultural climate. Now, if you would like to follow along, we have an app that you can have on your phone. You can download that. Maybe you've already downloaded that. There's going to be an outline that you can follow along. It's going to have all the verses in there coming from the book of Proverbs that we're looking at today. But I'm going to start off by reading a proverb that I think is super potent, super important. And if we learn to embrace this, right, we're going to do really well if we can own the truth of what this says. It's actually Proverbs 18:21. And it's very simple. It says, life and death are in the power of the tongue. Life and death are in the power of the tongue. Words are powerful. In fact, a good way to see it is words are like water, right? Water, the right dose and the right application, man, that's refreshing, that's cleansing, that's life-giving, right? Water has that power. But equally, if given in the wrong dose or with the wrong application, water can be corrosive, water can be destructive, and water can be life-taking. It's all in how you use them. And so I would say that nothing in our culture, our society, or our psyche has the same kind of power as the power of words. And if we think about how technology has come into play with that, man, exponentially, it has changed the way words are used, how they're cast out there, how they're put forth, and how they can be leveraged in life, right? I mean, you think about it, just with technology, words are abounding at this crazy exponential rate. So the president has 280 characters on Twitter, right? And he can say anything, but as soon as he's like, Putin, love him, right? As soon as he just says that, right? And what happens? He's only got 260 characters, but then millions of words are generated in like 6 hours from the just minority of words that he's able to use even on that platform. And so suddenly, man, it's like weeds in spring. Words are everywhere. Right? Because that's the power of words today with our technology. Or you think about it, those times where you've probably posted something on social media yourself, an article that you thought was really cool and interesting and even kind of fun, but you almost put it out there with some timidity because you don't know how people are going to respond. Because the words are going to come. You're going to have people say, that was awesome, and other people are going to be like super critical about what you post. I remember one time my wife posted an article about wolves in Yellowstone, and it was just fascinating. And she's like thinking, this is the simplest, most harmless article in the world. And then pretty soon there was like this weird like, well, what about the farmers? They don't like wolves. And I'm like, well, how did this even happen? It's just, like you're picking on this awesome article over wolves? It was just, I'm like, it's so weird. But it's the power of words, and words just get more generative with technology. Nowadays, you can put some post on Twitter thinking it's just your opinion, your personal deal, but you might lose your job over that because that is the power of words today. Or you think about even in your relationships, like in marriage or parenting, all it takes is one word with the wrong tone to change your entire day, right? All you have to do is be a teenager that mom says, hey, can you grab something? And you go, fine. Game on, man, right? And that one word is going to change, again, the whole tone of the home. See, this is why I want us to really own and understand that words are powerful things. Words can inspire change, can cause us to go beyond what we think we're capable of. I think about that with Dr. King, right? Where he challenged our society to see culture different. Those were powerful, good words. But that same word power was also revealed to bring out the ugliest and nastiest of our nature when Adolf Hitler could rally an entire population to hatred. I think about how words have the power to bloom forth faith, such as Billy Graham coming and doing a crusade. But the same types of words have the power to wither faith when Richard Dawkins has some type of symposium on why religion, faith, and Christianity is foolish in the 21st century. Our words can unify and our words can divide. Words can move us and shape us and startle us and harm us. They can free us, they can enslave us, they can energize us. Ultimately, they define us. And that's why it's no surprise to me that Proverbs spends so much time talking about how our words should be properly used by us. In fact, if you were to just simply go home today and read the 31 chapters of Proverbs and count up every time you found a verse on the use of words, you would find over 90 different occurrences telling us how we should speak properly, right? More than money, more than sex, more than power, more than family. All those topics, more than any of that stuff, Solomon in his great wisdom says, man, watch your words. Use them, leverage them, be aware of them in very thoughtful ways. Because if we're going to be streetwise, we have to have a streetwise speak. This simple thing where our lungs take in air, they push the air over the larynx, across the tongue, through the teeth, and bring to our world either life or death. It's potent. And we have to think about that even in light of what some of the data tells us when it comes to speech. It says that the average American, this is some polling data that's been done and some research that's been done, the average American speaks 700 times a day. Now, some of you are like, not my teenager, or not my husband, not 700 times. Well, great, let's half it. Let's half it again. Say, the average American speaks 175 times a day, right? What that means is there's all kinds of potential to say something we shouldn't say. There's all sorts of opportunity to have something come from our mouth that has this power to either, again, bring life and refreshing and joy and potency and power, or to bring death, destruction, division, and discord. Like, man, our odds are really high. I think about that even in what my occupation is. My job is to talk. That puts me in trouble all the time. And there are times on Sunday mornings that I say things where I'm like, and as soon as it's out, I'm like, ah! Trying to... It's already out there, and it's on the video, and it's too late. Now it's going to be on the internet, and I'm waiting for the trolls with more words. So, like that's just the reality. But it means in this that we want to be thoughtful, right? Now, if I was to go a little deeper, I would say the challenge is not first and foremost with our mouth. Our challenge starts with the mind, right? Our words are the caboose to a train of thought. Right? But it all starts internal. It starts with how we think, how we ingest information. And therefore, if we don't take in good words, good thought, good data, then we're not going to have a healthy and solid mind that then releases good words and good thoughts and good data. Poor information shapes poor thinking, which produces poor speaking. Proverbs 23, verses 15 and 16 talks about this in the positive, though. So here's this dad sitting his kid down saying, here's how you can live a wise life. And he says, my son, if your heart is wise, which in the Old Testament, the heart is the way they process and think. That was their kind of their idea of the brain. My son, if your heart is wise... He says, then me, as a father, my heart is going to be glad too. My innermost being will exult when your lips speak what is right. So this has a structure. We say in interpretation, it goes A, B, B, A. There's a structure to it. And so what he's saying is, again, the mind is the beginner. And if your heart, your mind is right, then man, your lips are going to speak what is right. What is equally true is if your mind and your thinking is wrong, then your words are going to be a mess. So what this means for us today is we need to be thoughtful about our thoughts if we're going to be thoughtful with our words. And that means I want us to keep out something that's really critical. This is a big theological word, all right? I'm going to go really heavy, hardcore for just a minute here and say, here's what I want to make sure you think about when it comes to what you take in. You do not want to ingest, big word, ready? Crap, all right? Don't ingest crap. Don't take in crap that shapes your thinking, that it informs then the way you respond to the world around you. Now, when I say crap, I mean this in a very simple way, C-R-A-P. We're going to look at each one of these, all right? Because each one of these means something. And so here's the first one. Don't take in crap. C is critical words. Right? As a spectator, as a listener, as a consumer of words, don't take in critical words. Don't take in the voices that are speaking negativity into your existence. Because if you do, you will then release those same types of words. So you'll be that critical person. You'll be that negative person. So you don't want to saturate your life with the Eeyores of our world. Right? Because if you do, that's what they're going to do. They're, it never's going to work. It's always a problem. We'll probably die. whatever the thing is, right? And the more you're around that, the more you're going to become like that. The more you're around a person who constantly says, you know what, I'm just bringing constructive criticism. I'm like, criticism, maybe not constructive always. Because they're just constantly a Debbie Downer, constantly negative. This is the perpetual pessimist in life. My poor wife married one of those, right? And so it's this thing that I'm trying to unlearn, because when I get that way and I'm like constantly in that Eeyore-ish space, man, I see that it has this negative infecting effect. And so in our lives, if we're trying to shape our mind to therefore shape our words, we want to make sure, first of all, we are very aware of the fact that it's easy to take in critical words, and it's not going to make us better, but probably worse, and therefore we want to keep the critical words out as much as possible. That's C. R is next, because it's crap. R is reckless words. The reckless words. These are the voices in our lives that may be flippant or even are deceptive. Right? So that's another one that's so important, right? So you got to think about, what are all the places where there is just basically reckless words that abound in my life? So, it's going and listening to, or reading on Twitter. There may be a lot of flippant words that are used there, a lot of things that are just ultimately reckless. Or maybe it's those voices that constantly have the disrespectful zingers in some way, always cutting down others, always trying to make them look foolish or dumb or like they don't think or whatever else. And there's tons of voices where there's a whole market trying to get Group A to disrespect Group B by having these really just amazingly potent, zinger, disrespectful words that kind of stereotype some opposite group of what they believe. I mean, this is just something that happens in our society. And again, it's going to make us then like that. And our words will begin to reflect those problems. That's the reckless words. Then there's A. And A are the angry words. The voices in our life that unleash or fill our minds with frustration. There are a lot of voices in society today that are all about angry words. Turn on talk radio. It's angry people, angry at people, about other people that are angry at them, right? And you take that in enough and you become frustrated. You become angry. You turn on the news and it's like, we're going to do a 5-minute segment. It's going to be 4 people in a roundtable discussion arguing about something like global policy. And it's like 5 minutes. They all scream at each other. They all have the zingers. They're all angry. And when you're done, you're like, why is my blood pressure so high? And I'm just angry. That's why. Right? And then pretty soon you're talking to other people in that same kind of frustrated, angry, urgent tone, and everything is fearful, and everything is deadly, and everything's broken, and everything's a problem, and it's hard to see the good in life because, again, there's so much anger. Even in the home, I grew up in a very angry environment. Lots of shouting, lots of yelling, and the more there was, the more there was. Because it informs our words. And so we want to keep out the critical words. We want to keep out the reckless words. We want to keep out the angry words. And then last, as much as possible, man, and this is a tough one in American culture, we want to keep out the perverse words. The perverse words. The things that corrupt our thinking. What do I mean by this? Well, I mean pretty much every Netflix original series ever designed. Every Showtime show ever made. Every HBO special ever comprised. Not every television show. I guess we got Hallmark. But, like music and movies, and the list goes on and on and on. There is just this infatuation with kind of this, how do we push the envelope? How do we get more reckless with our words? And those things inform the mind, which then informs the way we use our words. And I see it in my own life. When I start to ingest too much of this unhealthy thing, pretty soon, man, my tongue's a little looser on in things in ways that probably it shouldn't be. And I know that is its influence. It writes into the mind ideas, which then unleashes the tongue in a certain way. Now, I'm not trying to push that we're a bunch of prudes here, but I want us to be prudent. I believe Solomon wants us to focus on that which is healthy or helpful or resilient for life. Crap programs the mind. And therefore, we want to make sure that we are being programmed in healthier and better ways, right? To properly prep our mouths by strategically filling our minds. In fact, even in the book of James, which is like the Proverbs of the New Testament to me, it's a bunch of commands are like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, do that, and you're going to do well. It's the same idea. And in chapter 3, he talks about our mouth, the tongue, and he says, man, it's like a fire, and you can unleash hell with the tongue. I mean, like, you say words, and it destroys stuff if you're not strategic with your words. And no sooner does he talk about the risk and dangers of our speech, he immediately drops into wisdom. It's like he says, watch out for what you say. Well, how can you do that? Be wise. Seek the wisdom that is from above, not the earthly, sensual, and demonic stuff of our day, but rather seek God's insight for living, and you will live wise, and from that you will speak well. That's what James says. So we want to stockpile content that is helpful, that is profitable, that is acceptable, and is useful. That's the first. So the battle is with the mind, so take in healthy things to the mind, right? Now, what we have to couple to this is this next element, which is just good old-fashioned self-awareness, right? Self-regulation. To be thoughtful enough in the moment to make decisions on how we actually use our words, because we have to think of our words like weapons, right? They're like loaded things, right? And so when we're going to put this to use, we want to make sure we're not pointing it at something we don't intend to kill or destroy, you know? And so there has to be this sense of, okay, do I need to say this? What's the value in what I'm about to say? What I'm asking us to do in this sense is to think. To think before we speak. And each of these means something. What do I mean by think? Well, if you're taking notes, the first is asking yourself the question, is what I'm about to say true? I'm about to speak some words. As I'm about to say them, is it true what I'm about to say? Because here's what Proverbs 12:22 says. It says, lying lips are an abomination to the Lord. Lying lips are an abomination to the Lord. So, man, we talk about sins, right? We read the sins of the Bible and we use that word abomination. That's going to be for some really big sins. And here he says, man, lies, they're a big deal. What that means for us as we use our words is, you know what? We don't want to use words that are just speculation. Words that are assumptions, words where we're trying to be really smart by sleuthing something out, but we don't know for sure, but we say it anyway, even though we don't know for sure. Those are all destructive things. Slander's destructive, gossip's destructive, half-truths are destructive, suspicion is destructive. And so before we say something, we want to make sure, hey man, is this factual? Is it in good faith? Am I positive on what I'm about to say? Am I going to guide people in a way that is truly wise? Is it true? Now, sometimes you'll say, well, but if it's true, I can say it however I want, correct? No. Just because something's true doesn't mean we have to say it like it's a zinger. In fact, that leads us to the next thing. Not only are we going to ask ourselves about what I'm about to say is true, but the next one is it helpful? If I'm thinking, T is it true? H is it helpful? Proverbs 27:9 says, oil and perfume make the heart glad, and the sweetness of a friend comes from his earnest or sincere counsel. I'm going to read that again. Oil and perfume make the heart glad, and the sweetness of a friend comes from his earnest counsel. Christians, if you're a Christian here under the tent today, man, this is so for us. Our mission in life, you ready? Is not to be right. It's to be righteous. It's not to say, I have the facts on everything and I'm going to say it with some velocity. No, we're trying to be righteous. And part of righteousness is this sense of being generous, of being grace-filled, of having this disposition that says, man, I want to be sweetness to the souls of people around me. Therefore, I want to make sure that what I say is helpful in life. We should approach life being coaches and guides and teachers. We shouldn't approach life necessarily trying to shame or to guilt or cajole people into some way of doing life. This is what we bring to the table that can be so different. We want to be helpful in what we do. Having goodwill discussions versus debates, trying to know where another person is coming from and being able to articulate what their point of view is. And then they go, yeah, that's what I think. We'll go, okay, now I understand you better. Like, that is what it means to be helpful. We're not trying to win everything. We want to win over. And even when we disagree, we want to do it with dignity because that's what it means to be helpful. So is it true? Is it helpful? Next is what I'm about to say, inspiring. Is it inspiring? Proverbs 12:18 says, there is one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. The tongue of the wise brings healing. I think there's a lot of sword thrusting today, right? If I just go through the different news outlets, thrust, thrust, thrust. The other side is stupid, thrust. I look at the left and the right in politics, thrust, thrust, thrust. It's just a fight. But we're to bring something different to the environment. We are to have the tongue that brings healing. Now, does that mean everybody that's a follower of Jesus needs to be like all Joel Osteen? Like, I'm just here to encourage. I don't say anything bad. You know, like, that's not what I'm getting at, right? At the same time, there's something about that where you go like, why do so many people listen to Joel Osteen? It's like, because he is pleasant. There is something about pleasantness that's really, really helpful. I mean, I've gotten into these really long format podcasts of discussions between people that completely disagree, but it's these good faith, honest, thoughtful, caring conversations. And from it, you're like, wow, that's really inspiring that they can reason together with a legitimate desire to understand one another. What an amazing idea. I'm inspired by just listening to that healthy type of dialogue. That is what we should bring to the table. We should inspire. See, I grew up, again, like I said, not only in a shouting environment, but I grew up in a home that sought to motivate me, not through inspiration, but through kind of fear and threat and harshness. And I was motivated then from those things, right? So I never felt like I could measure up. I was just trying to stay on the surface, you know, and not sink. Did it work? Did it move me forward? Yeah. Did it create some wounds in me that even to this day, I don't know if they've fully healed? Well, that's equally true. And so this is where we want to inspire with our words and not simply just drive and motivate. To have a message that says, man, in Jesus, yes, you can do in a tough-to-do world. Like, that is the spirit of inspiring. So these are ways that we want to use our words. The next one, number 4, this is a thing that you might want to then ask sometimes when you're trying to figure out how to inspire and how to really make sure I'm making sure it's true and helpful and all of that. Sometimes you need to ask yourself, is it necessary? Is what I'm about to say necessary? It says in Proverbs 12:23, a prudent man conceals knowledge, but the heart of the fools, they proclaim folly, right? They say everything. So what this means, and this is a tough one for us, we don't have to always take the cake of our thoughts and slice it all up to pass out pieces of our mind, all right? We don't have to do that. See, we almost live in a time that says like everybody should give their opinions all the time, and here's the social network so you can do that. But we don't have to do that. In fact, Proverbs actually says you're better off if perhaps sometimes you don't actually engage in those things. You don't have to always give a piece of your mind. Now, sometimes an open rebuke is better than, again, the kisses of an enemy. Like Proverbs says that. Sometimes you need to say something, even if it's going to be hard. Other times, Proverbs says, you know what? If you just keep your mouth closed, you'll look intelligent, right? And so we have to navigate that wisely. But then it's really good to say, man, is it necessary? So with my 18-year-old son, there'll be things every once in a while that he'll do. And I have to decide, do I talk to him about this or do I not talk to him about this? And I have to kind of run it through the saying, well, if I'm going to do it, I want to make sure that it's true, and I want to make sure it's helpful, and I want to make sure it's inspiring, and I want to make sure it's necessary. Do I need to have this conversation? Sometimes I'm better off just to hug him, just to give him a hug. Do you know I love you, man? To woo him through that affection without saying a word. Other times it's like, hey man, can I talk to you about something? And then I want to run it through that grid, right? Especially having an unbelieving son. It makes it really, really interesting. So I have to ask, is it necessary? And maybe what drives that call in the end, do I need to say it or not say it, is probably the last part, is what I'm about to say, kind. Is it kind? Proverbs 16:24 says, gracious words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the body. It also says in Proverbs that a kind or gracious word, it turns away wrath, right? I've had people in my life that will send me an angry email, and when I read that angry email, I can guarantee you my first thought is not, I should really think about that. My first thought is, oh, you want a piece of my mind? You know, and that is our tendency. When it's not a kind word, your salsa level goes up. My wife actually had to make a phone call the other day to the state of Washington Health Department about her licensing, which anytime you're calling any state agency at about 4 p.m. on a Friday, it's going to be a bad day for the person on the other end, right? And so this person was like, what do you want? You know, like the scary, like, grouchy lady from Monsters Incorporated. What do you want? Why are you calling me? You know, and so she just bad mood instant, right? And so my wife's like, okay, now I can go bad mood on you as well. Like, hey, man, I'm paying your salary, taxpayer, right? So you could do that. But instead she's like, hi, how are you? You know my wife, right? So just went super gooey kind, right? And that, I'm okay now, you know. And like a kind word turned away the wrath. A kind word changed everything. And so, man, kind words are powerful. And they actually get things done. Sometimes people are like, unless you don't complain and you're not grouchy, you're not going to get anything done. I'm like, I disagree. I think sometimes actually kind words can get things done more effectively. In fact, Proverbs even says this, with patience, a ruler may be persuaded, and a soft tongue will break a bone. Now, that's a weird one. Like, soft tongue will break a bone. It's like sticks and stones. No, it's not. What he's saying is a kind tongue has so much more power than a harsh one, right? If you leverage it properly in your life. And so, man, we want to be kind. And just ask that question, are my words, what I'm about to say, is it kind? Is it patient? Is it helpful versus is it shaming? And is it guilting? See, here's what I'm convinced of. We live in a particular little bubble of human history where words have always been powerful, but now words are plethora. They're everywhere. And words are dividing, and words are harsh, and words are critical, and words are mean, and words are belittling, and words are hateful. And they have all this traction. And then I think about what Jesus places on our shoulders then as his followers. He says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go into that world, and I want you to do something that's so hard to do. I want you to be peacemakers. I want you to generate peace in whatever your sphere of influence is. I want you to go in there, and I want you to make a difference. And I think the biggest way that we as followers of Jesus can make a difference today is with our words, being different in an environment of hostility by bringing peace, by bringing kindness, by bringing thoughtfulness, by actually bringing inspiration. It's going to take some restraint on our part. It's going to take some thoughtfulness on our part. It's going to take some self-discipline on our part. But man, what Jesus says is, man, I call you to be peacemakers. And what his half-brother James says is when you do that, when you want to be peacemakers, you actually bring to the table the very thing you're hungry for in your world. You sow righteousness, and it creates more peace. I believe we as Christians must see our words as a grassroots opportunity to sow righteousness in our environment. To use our words on social media, to use our words in conversation, to use our words with friends and our spouse and our kids and our parents, to use our words in ways that are constructive, that are beautifying, that are inspiring and encouraging, that we don't take in the crap, but rather we think through what we say, and from that we sow peace. Let's go and pray together. Jesus, I thank you for the reminder of using words wisely, especially, like I said, in a time where every day when I turn on the news, there's reckless words and hateful words and victimizing words and victim words that then want to victimize how they're victims, and the list can go on and on and on. And I pray that we are different. I pray that we are understanding. I pray that we are good-willed and good-intended, and we want to understand as we communicate, and we want to be understanding as we communicate, and that we wouldn't take it for granted that words are the most powerful things we wield. More than money, more than power, it's what we say. And so give us your wisdom for life. Holy Spirit, work in us to saturate our minds with what you want so that we then say things as you want us to say them. Jesus, we thank you and we praise you for your goodness and your grace in your good name. Amen.
Amen. Would you stand as we close?